I know all the folks round these arts and parts. Can't say I know you. Leastways, not yet. But I dare say I know what you'll be wanting. Some of the crack, maybe. A wee yarn with your sup, is it? No harm in that. Come on over. Warm yourself, I'll warn you, though. If it's the old Begorra and Blarney shenanigans you're after, you'll not hear them from me. Well, as such like, pleases you, you sit on. I'll fill your ears. And see what story is meant for you on this dark old night.
I'm Chris.
I'm Spence.
And this is the Irish Gothic Podcast.
Well, good evening, folks, and welcome back to Irish Gothic. We have a episode this week, which is Irish as, green beer on St. Patrick's Day and leprechaun hats. It's the famous Shillelagh, that emblem of Ireland, which, surprisingly, it certainly, its origins certainly surprised me. So tonight we're going to talk about the Shillelagh. So Shillelaghs, folks, I'm sure anyone who's ever been in an Irish gift shop or been here on a visit or been sent a dishcloth with Irish proverbs on it, they're normally bedecked with shillelaghs, and they come in all tacky forms. Not always tacky, but what are they? What are they all about, and what actually are they? Well, the origins of the shillelagh is from the majestic ancient forests in County Wicklow, and a shillelagh in essence is a piece of gnarled, stout, really strong blackthorn wood, which would have been used as a walking stick. It's become the emblem for lots of military regiments in Ireland. So a shillelagh in essence is a stick, but its history and what it was used for is much more intriguing than what you might think if you pick up a plastic one in a tourist shop. Chris, I believe you know a little bit about how these things were originally used.
Well, most certainly the shillelagh was a fighting stick. Now, of course, fighting sticks go back to the earliest origins of mankind. In fact, you see the cavemen with clubs and they go around clubbing each other. It's the best stick you can get, the strongest stick you can get. You can beat your enemy with it. And I suppose it was the, improving, doing your modifications to it, improving it and making it better. It was sort of the first arms race. Now, stick fighting as a martial arts was once common throughout Europe and indeed the world. Vestiges still survive, notably maybe France, Italy, Portugal, Japan, the Philippines, South Africa, New Zealand, and of course, Ireland. The enduring nature of the now iconic shillelagh owes its survival to a fascinating amalgam of law, propaganda, colonialism, and xenophobia. Because you could imagine that it was the only weapon you could carry. You could use it as a walking stick, but you could also beat the man over the head that's trying to steal your bag of gold off you as you walk down a lane, Spence.
Absolutely. I think was it the preferred weapon of the leprechauns for that very purpose, wasn't it?
Certainly is, because it represents being Irish, no matter where you are in the world.
Yeah, as you say, Chris, it is that symbol of strength and Irishness and maybe even resistance towards colonialism, as you say. I mean, so much to it. I mean, that this whole tradition of stick fighting developed over centuries in pre-famine Ireland. It seemed to have a lot of correlation with market days or fairs when people from different areas would all converge and old scores would be settled. They talk about one notorious one, Donnybrook Fair, which was a mecca for stick fighting and tigress mayhem. Brawls, riots, death count. I believe there was up to 20 people killed at one such fight. Probably more, Chris, because the head injuries later wouldn't manifest till later on. So young fighting men would come to these fairs, they would stuff their hats with straw to try and ward off the worst effects of the stick fighting. And it wasn't just the men either. Women were known to gather around the edges of these stick fights, fill their socks with stones and pebbles, bit like a Life of Brian sketch here, and chuck these stone-filled socks into the melee as well to claim a few heads. So, absolutely a symbol of chaos and riotous behaviour.
Sounds like a good Saturday night.
It's a typical Saturday night.
Well,
and again, you talked about colonialism. This was something that the English almost used to say, look how lawless and how riotous and how savage and how drunken these Irish, these paddies are. And they used the Shillelagh as almost a thing to mock and then show us for being less than what we are. When you compare that to the fine, upstanding image of Britannia that was projected, here we were, stick-wielding savages in the countryside.
Well, Spence, the word Shillelagh, which has its origins in the once majestic oak forest of Shillelagh in County Wicklow, unfortunately has now become synonymous with a certain type of tacky tourist artefact. It certainly does, but however, the genuine article was a formidable weapon, mostly made from oak or blackthorn rootwood, around 3 feet long, terminating in a deadly gnarled knot. Varying in girth, slimmer, the slimmer variety could be poised ostensibly as a highly polished walking stick.
It's interesting, Chris, we talk about the blackthorn. The other tree or wood associated with Ireland would be the hawthorn. Now, like the blackthorn, it's gnarly, it's tough, it's readily available. Any farmer who's ever had to cut down a hawthorn tree would say it's a job and a half. So the question then is, I wonder why blackthorn and not hawthorn? Now, I know you'll know this because of your Irish Gothic interest, but the hawthorn itself has so much connected to it in relation to the fairies and how unlucky it is considered to cut down a hawthorn tree. And those same attachments aren't on blackthorns. If you mess with the hawthorn, there's roads in Ireland which bend around a hawthorn tree. There were some workers in DeLorean, the great car from Back to the Future. They believe that DeLorean went down and collapsed as a company because one of its factories was built on the site of where a hawthorn tree had been uprooted. So look, I can understand why people were maybe a wee bit shy of using hawthorns.
But also,
every bit as good a piece of wood.
We mentioned hawthorn last week in Avertalk, where they put hawthorn on top of its grave. It's that mythical links to hawthorn, like you're saying. But definitely, I don't think hawthorn itself is as strong of the formidable blackthorn, because the blackthorn is when I know that you've seen the walking sticks, and there's a few times we've filmed with our Shanachie with a walking stick, and they are rock hard. I mean, if they hit you with the knobbly bit on the end, you're going to feel that okay. You're
going to feel it all right. Hey, and it's not to say, Chris, that the blackthorn doesn't have magical properties, because interestingly, there are a few things around the blackthorn, just as a wee aside, so they can protect you against the fairies, and particularly the Lunantashes, if I'm saying that correctly, the moon fairies. So the moon fairies were believed to look over blackthorns. If you were to cut down a blackthorn, the moon fairies wouldn't be so keen. So what they would say is the best time to cut a blackthorn, if you fancy making yourself a blackthorn really, Chris, would be during the harvest when the moon was full, because those fairies would be off doing whatever they do in the moonlight, and their eye would be off the ball, and you'd be able to nab yourself a blackthorn. It's also a darker side to it as well. It's sort of regarded as a female tree in mythology. So Queen Maeve, the Morrigan who we spoke about, that goddess of battle, strife and fertility. And then we have the Cailleach, the crone of death, and it's believed that she started winter by banging the blackthorn on the ground, and that's what heralded in winter. So, look, again, it's just got a great mythology around it. Probably not as much as the hawthorn, but, it's certainly something that features in other Irish legends. as well as this very real, practical use that you're talking about.
Well, I mean, they just don't come off the tree looking the way they finally look. I mean, generally the longer sticks were known as wattles, and the shorter sticks were referred to as capine. The wood is cured with a variety of different methods, including immersing in manure, rubbing with butter, smoking in a chimney, and even polishing with magpie blood could be part of the process. Some shillelaghs were loaded, weighted, and malted with lead for extra impact.
No way.
So these were formidable weapons.
And it's a real art. I mean, I don't know how common it is these days, but I do know a few locals here where I live in Ballyclare who do still make these sticks, and they are a thing of beauty to behold. And even more so now, knowing the legacy attached to them. And funny, one of the things that came up during the research was, because you mentioned there, Chris, about the kind of colonialism and xenophobia, following the Battle of the Boyne and back in 1690, a huge battle between Protestant and Catholic forces. These penal laws were brought in. Catholics were forbidden to own property and land. They weren't allowed to own horses over a certain height, and they could not be in possession of weapons. And this led to that resurgence of what you're talking about, Chris, the use of shillelaghs as a weapon, because other forms of weaponry were being denied to people as part of these penal laws.
It was definitely an art form. It was an art form amongst the Irish peasants at that time. And like many other art forms, we've lost it. I mean, we still have the ability to hit each other over the head with sticks. I just don't think we probably do it with shillelaghs, which I think is probably unfortunate to have a good shillelagh. But unfortunately, these days, when you pick one up in the shop, they're usually 2 or 3 inches long. And it's actually funny because we're going to do this season, obviously, leprechauns, but we talk about how in the mythology of leprechauns, they became smaller and smaller as Christianity grew bigger and bigger. And the shillelagh did the same. They became smaller and smaller.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I'd say that you could probably walk down a street anywhere in Ireland and you would see possibly an old man with a shillelagh as a walking stick.
And reducing it in stature, Chris, as I know we'll talk about this more in the leprechauns, but that's almost reducing Irishness. This symbol of Irish strength and resistance, to almost mock it by reducing it, by diminishing it, it's a clever tactic. It's probably one used by many a government and many a warlord and a dictator today.
Well, I can't remember whether you said this earlier. I think you may have touched on it, but the British government have a number of their regiments in the army have the shillelagh in their coats of arms.
Yeah.
And that is almost an appropriation.
And it shows you, Chris, it keeps that connection, so something that was almost laughed at and sneered at is now a proud emblem of armed forces from this neck of the woods, who, men and women who have died wearing that emblem upon them or under that flag. So, it's found its way back in to maybe a more respectful place than where, don't get me wrong, there's something quite nice about a little miniature shillelagh, but I think now we know what the history of them is, it just makes it that all the more intriguing.
Well, I think I've been sold on it. I definitely want a shillelagh. A beaten shillelagh,
a beaten shillelagh.
A beaten shillelagh, most definitely. So I think we've covered what a shillelagh is, because, neither of us know how to fight with a shillelagh.
No.
And we'd probably be beaten by our wives with it.
Well, let's hear, Craig. I'm trying to think now, because you asked me last episode about favourite vampire films, so I'm going to ask you now, favourite film with stick fighting. I don't know if this is the correct answer, but The Field. Is that what Richard Harris does Berenger in with?
He does, yes. He definitely does.
It's a big old shillelagh, isn't it?
It's a big old shillelagh. He carries it with him as a walking stick.
And what better weapon, because that story is the commercialisation of Ireland, capitalism, the rich American coming to buy the land that this man had tilled from nothing. And what better weapon symbolically to use than that shillelagh? Any other famous fighting sticks? Don't have to be Irish.
I remember Arthur Conan Doyle had Sherlock Holmes. He had it was more London-based, UK-based rather than Ireland, but it was very much a gentleman's sport. They gentlemen knew, and they were also able to pull the swords out of their sticks. They used to do
course,
that.
Yeah.
but I think there was a gentleman's martial arts. I can't remember the name of it. I must look it up. Which was why they had their canes and they could use them like swords, but to deflect and so on. So
there's a character in Walking Dead, isn't there? It's a staff, I guess, more. What do you call him? Morgan.
Oh, yeah.
He has it's not a shillelagh by any means. Put a big gnarly end on it, and it is.
Well, that's it. And I think that if we were ever in a situation for The Walking Dead, a stick is probably one of the best weapons you could have, rather than even a gun, because you never run out of a stick.
If we keep talking, Chris, you were going to say The Walking Dead's Irish.
I didn't go into it on our last episode because there was a sideline from our talk about The Walking Dead, and not the film, but The Walking Dead as in vampires and zombies, but I didn't go into it. Maybe I'll go into it in a shorter. Further down the line we'll do an episode on it, but certainly Ireland does have its own zombies and various other legends about that.
I have to say, Chris, when you first said we were going to look at the Shillelagh, I thought, well, what is there to say, But my goodness, it's been one of those, well, for me personally, it's not as dark as some of our other episodes, but it's really, really, and there's no social side of it, the colonialism, and yeah, it's been brilliant. Good find, a little gem there, Chris. Yeah,
I mean, I've just looked up online. You can buy yourself a nice little shillelagh for a proper shillelagh for $69.99.
That's not bad. You know what you get me for my birthday, Chris?
And that's it. So that's Shillelagh, Spence. So maybe I have to beat you over the head to find out what we're going to do next week, do you?
Well, you actually touched upon it earlier when you mentioned pots of gold and Shillelagh. So I think we're about due to visit the Little Gentleman, our good friends the Leprechauns, Chris. I think there's probably more than one podcast in it. There's much more, as with the Shillelagh, there's much more to it than the gift shop memorabilia that we all see. So I'd be keen to do the Leprechauns.
Oh, excellent. So we'll be somewhere over the rainbow next week.
Excellent. Well, listen, folks, thanks very much. We'll put up some things on the show notes in relation to Shillelaghs, and can't wait to chat to you all again in the company of the little gentry, the little men, the Leprechauns.
Catch you next week. We're top of the morning to you.
Bye, folks.
Looks like your story has found you. I wish it were another. But what's meant for you won't go by you. I'm sorry. No need to look so scared, eh? Enjoy the fire. Have a sup. Sure. Isn't it all just Irish Gothic? All just Irish Gothic.
You can find us at Irish Gothic Pod on Instagram or X. Or if you want to support us, please buy us a coffee.
And look, while you're there, give us a follow to keep up with all things in the Irish Gothic Podcast. Send us any Irish myths, legends, stories that you'd like us to delve into next.
The Irish Gothic Podcast was brought to you by Causeway Pictures. It's hosted by Chris Patterson and Spence Wright, and was produced by Rebecca Alcorn. All rights reserved. Check out our other podcast, Hostage to the Devil, which delves into the dark world of possession and exorcism. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts.